talk on race. My name is Francis in this discussion. First of all, I want to thank Garcia, that is the Ghana Association of the Ghanaian Association of Seattle, and I want to thank them for giving us the opportunity to host this talk that would enlighten us about our environment, about what we see, about what we experience in our everyday lives in our workplaces, our homes, and our schools or wherever we find ourselves. Thank you for giving us this platform. I also want to thank the organizers of this, particularly Elder Stephen and then Sam Nimako for the great job putting together the logistics for this talk. And I also want to thank our expert panelists for agreeing to share their expertise with us today. I think that by the time we drop out of this, we would have so many things to think about, so many tools to work with as far as race is concerned. And of course, you, the participants, we are very grateful for your time here today. And we hope that you will leave here with something that you will be able to contribute to changing the current status quo. We know that you have other things, but you decided to be with us today. We appreciate your time. Before I start, I have an anecdote to share with you. Back in Ghana, when I was in primary 6, we read a story about 3 neighbors, and that is the bird, the tortoise, and the creeping plant. By the way, for the American folks, primary 6 is like grade 6 equivalent. And so this story was about, these 3 neighbors who were there, and one beautiful afternoon, the bird was, in the tree making a lot of noise, singing, and, just making a lot of noise. So the tortoise said to the creeping plant that, can you tell the bird to stop talking or stop making noise, because that is going to endanger our lives? And the creeping plant said, no, I don't care if, a hunter comes to hunt the bird, it's none of my business. Then the tortoise said, okay. And so within, a couple of minutes, a hunter heard about, the singing bird and came around, shot the bird. And when the bird fell, it fell, at where the tortoise was lying down. So the tortoise, couldn't run. So the hunter said, oh, this is, one stone, 2 birds. And then, gathered the bird and the tortoise and, didn't know what to do with these 2. And so he turned around and saw the creeping plant and said, oh, then this is a creeping plant that I can just cut and, tie my booty and go home. And so the creeping plant was cut. Essentially, the 3 of them died. So if, the creeping plant had listened to tortoise and told the bird to stop talking, then their lives would have been spared. So this is in connection with what is happening here in the United States for centuries, and it is still happening. And so whatever happens here, matters to us, matters to our families, both home and abroad, wherever we find ourselves as Black people, whether it's in Fiji, Zimbabwe, Canada, we are all in this together. So just as the anecdote said it all, Garcia saw it necessary for us to enlighten ourselves about what is happening and what we can do as citizens to participate in making the change that we want to see or experience here in America and elsewhere, where the Black color is a problem, to say, to so many people. So with experienced people, we have gathered them to talk to us about this issue. And as an African saying goes, he who lives by the river Nile does not use spittle to wash the hands. We have solicited, the expertise of these people, and they voluntarily agreed to share what they have with us. So, without much ado, I will proceed with the panelists to introduce themselves. But before then, they will have, rounds of questions to address, and participants can ask questions. And so you can, just go down and click on the participant tab. You will see raise hand. You raise your hand, and we will allow you to ask your questions. You can ask a question specific to what any of the panelists will say, or any generic question, then they can address the questions. We will appreciate if you can, turn your camera on if you are going to ask a question, but of course it's not a requirement, but that would be helpful for us. And so we're going to zoom into our introductions and take it off from there. So I will call on Benis to tell us brief about yourself.
Hi everyone. My name is Bernice Whitley, and I work in education with Tacoma Public Schools. I can't think of anything else. Is there anything else you want me to speak to, Francis?
Yeah, so that should be fine. What you do as So.
Oh, I'm a within education field. I work as a high school counselor.
Okay, thank you so much, Bernice. Eric.
You're muted, Eric.
All right, hello everyone. Hey, thank you so much for hopping on here and joining the conversation. My name is Eric, and I am happy to be here and happy to join you. When I'm not speaking to others, I am working as a police officer, and so for the last year and a few months, I've been working predominantly as a police officer with a local city. Prior to that, I went through the public health program with the University of Washington, where ultimately led me to what I'm doing today. And I believe that the issues that we're facing is a public health issue. And so I'm happy to talk about it.
Thank you. Vicky.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria. I'm a recent grad of the University of Washington, currently job searching. It's a lot of fun in Corona season. And my background, I studied international studies with a focus in communications, and then communications with the focus in global media and technology. So I've just spent the past 4 years sort of merging all of these fun things together in different positions and research. So I'm very excited to be a part of this conversation as well.
Thank you, Vicky, and thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. So we're going to start with the questions, and I want to start with Vicky. So Vicky, what does it mean to be Black? Or what events marked your experience as a Black person or your Black identity? And how did you react to that incident? Or what solution did you adopt? We want to know.
What does it mean to be Black? Well, I think fortunately I've had the opportunity to, I guess, be Black in many different contexts, in a few different countries as well. So I was born in Ghana and I came here when I was 7. So I definitely had no concept of race. Like I have a little sister who was born here and she knows, like, she's like, I'm a brown girl, I'm Black, like she understands who she is and she's only 6. So I definitely did not have that perception at all. And when we moved here, I lived in a predominantly Hispanic community. I lived in San Diego, but even recognizing that they were Hispanic didn't come until later. And then just throughout, I don't know, I'm not quite sure I want to say I got to college, but I think subconsciously I've always just understood that I was a black person. And I think for me, my blackness started to manifest in lack of opportunity because I was involved in a lot of programs that were about bridging the gap. And when I look around, there were quite a few students who looked like me. So in any sort of setting, the most amount of black people I would interact with would be in those particular programs. And so I guess for me, blackness at this point in my life is just recognizing how much it's the most salient to me, which means like the most recognizable sort of characteristic or race out there. When I went to I visited Missouri in 2018, and it was so weird to recognize my blackness and the fact that I wasn't the only black one. There was a lot of black people, so I was like, I'm kind of uncomfortable. Like, I'm not used to this many black people because if I sit on the light rail, I'm usually the only black passenger for like the next three carts. And then I go to Missouri, I'm taking a train, and it's all like, everybody who got on was black, and I'm just like, they probably think I'm weird, but it's not for the reason that they think it is. I was just kind of like, whoa. And like I said, I've had the opportunity to, again, be black in different countries. And like when I went to France, for instance, there's a lot of black people, but you start to recognize it, like the nuance in being like a black African versus like black or African American as it would be in the States is so different. So, like I said, ultimately, blackness, here she is, everybody. Blackness is just sort of having to always consider like the intersections and spaces you are in. I did not factor this in, y'all. I thought I kept her busy. We'll be back. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's
I'm gonna end it there. She ended my tirade.
Okay. Thank you, Vicky, for that intro to the question. Yeah, I would like to call on Eric. Eric, can you tell us what does it mean to be black to you, and what incident have you experienced, and how did you react to that experience? Being in America.
So I think for a lot of us, like Vicky, I mean, I was also born in Ghana. I came to the States around early teens, so around 13, 14. And, I think just the excitement of being in America, it kind of uh, blocks and covers the reality of what it means to be kind of thrown in an environment that where things don't reflect the values and the mentality and how things look from your background. And so for me, it was different. I remember the first instance where I felt that I was a little different was the first time I raised my hand in high school to answer a question. And I think this was the first week I was in America. I went to answer the question and I stood up, and you could just see the shock on everybody's face because you and I are both taught that you raise your hand and you stand up to address the teacher, somebody in power. And so that made the teacher a bit uncomfortable. And to her credit, she really guided me very well in sort of not making a big deal of it. And, like, this is how we do it here. I can't point to anything negative that I've experienced being a black person. And I won't say that I haven't experienced anything negative, but it is more of how I've come to perceive it. And with how things are going on, I see blackness as sort of just having a resolve to say that I just cannot fail. It becomes, success becomes the standard that you set for yourself as a black man and as a black person. And so I think that is really the point that I want to try and communicate with this platform, which is to be black is to be like water. You take shape of the various situations that you find yourself in, and you make the best of it, and you thrive and you succeed without making any excuses.
Thank you very much. I just cannot fail. You just cannot fail as a Black person. Success is the standard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I also experienced, what you you went through even in grad school. I came here and, the teacher would be talking and I would try to raise my hand. And, when I got to know that you don't have to raise your hand to talk, and even the sheer fact that, she would just, or he would just be talking and then you would just chip in and ask a question was a tough thing for me to do, given the social structure relations, in Ghana. And that was really challenging. Thank you for sharing that. Benis, can you tell us what Blackness means to you and any experiences you have had as a result of your color, and what remedy did you take?
So for me, I guess Blackness is what I am. And Victoria says some things just like Eric that is very similar to just moving to this country. The aspect of race was never a thing being back home in Ghana. I mean, everybody we were all black, and so that's all we pretty much know until moving here, going to high school, starting to understand the different racial pieces involved, and realizing I went to a high school that was very diverse, but then kids kept to their own. So the African kids kept together, the white kids stayed on your side, and pretty much you had, and it was also a big immigrant community high school, and so I. Now that I think back, I always felt like that should have been a more welcoming space, but in retrospect, it wasn't. Which would I would speak on that because that was part of the reasons that made me want to go into education in a lot of ways. But just being here, trying to understand the culture, how things were different. I mean, the kids in high school, knowing that you're from Africa, they're not so nice, but you get used to them after a while. But some of the things that I experienced in high school really pushed me. I attended a historically black college. Um, Towards the end of my high school career, I started to be in tune with my blackness in a lot of ways. And so I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to a certain black college. I need to be around black greatness to see what it looks like. And so I went to Virginia State University. I'm from Virginia originally. And I was laughing when Victoria said when she went to a different state, it was like, oh, these black people. That's how I felt when I moved to Washington. One of the first questions I asked my husband was, where are the black people? And so it was very going from not necessarily the university I attended, but just going from one different area to another area where it was like days apart, right? You had all the, I had in Virginia, I could not go in the store and not, I saw less white people. If you wanted to see white people, you went to a different side of town, come to Washington, and that's what you see, that's what you're used to. And then I go back to Virginia and I'm telling my husband, oh my God, there's too many black people here. And so it's over the years, it's just becoming in tune with the color of my skin. It has guided me to be very careful in a lot of things I do. I'm one of the very few people in my profession as a person of color, and also in my building as a person of color. But looking back, there were times where I think about it, and Victoria said it well too. In high school, I was a part of programs that were geared towards minority students. I mean, I did the project discovery, I did the college access providers, everything that could help a minority go to college. I was there. And then looking back, everybody looked like me in those programs. I mean, everybody was black. And so I honestly, although it gave access, it was very limited access. It didn't give everything that we needed to be able to, what is it, get used, understand the system and how things work. One of the things I always I was pushed me to go to college, but they never told me how to get there. You didn't have the resources to get me there. All you said was, it's like, we get you to this country, we would give you the American talk, like you have to go to college. This is the land of opportunity. But they didn't grasp the concept of how do you get there, which these programs afforded me the information to be able to get there. And so it's some of those things. It's just a reminder of these are the things, the barriers that Black people have to break for ourselves to be able to better understand the system. And it kind of pushed me once after college. After my undergrad, I was thinking to myself, I was searching for a job also, and it was like, oh my God, is this going to work? And I remember my mom said to me, I told you to go into nursing. And it was the funniest thing. But I later decided, no, I think I'm going to go into education, because then I had the opportunity to ponder back on my high school years to figure out who's going to be that person to help kids of color to be able to thrive, to know the systems, and not be in the situation that I found myself in later. And so that was another conversation when I told my parents I was going into education. My mom goes, "So you're still not going to go into nursing?" I go, "No, mom. You have to understand why it's so important for me as a person of color, and also, I always do this, and some of my friends are like, we get it. Not necessarily just a person of color, as an African, I have to do certain things. You have Black people in education. We don't have enough Africans in education, but we have a lot of African kids in the education system. And so being in those spaces, occupying those spaces to get the opportunities that are out there to be able to bring back to my people is very important to me. And I hold that passion into my heart. So I went back, same school, for education, and then eventually moved here, and I really love what I do in education. So it's just been just different steps in my life to be able to reaffirm my being as a person of color, and my being as an African, just being a person of color too.
Good, good. Thank you so much for this brilliant response to the question, and thank you all. To take away from what she also just said is, we push our kids to go to school, but we don't, let them know how to get there and how to survive the system. And I think that this is one of the reasons why we are having this forum, so that those of us who have been there, or those of us who have, experienced certain things that others haven't got the privilege, then we will be able to share our experiences for others to also know, so that they wouldn't have to go through the way we went through certain things. And that is the main reason, or one of the main reasons why, Garcia organizes this program for us. And one thing she also mentioned is lack of diversity in a diverse community. Her first point was, lack of diversity in a diverse community. What a paradox. So the next question based on this is that biases and discrimination come in different forms and in subtle ways. How do we identify them and react to them? In our workplaces, in our schools, wherever we find ourselves here, discrimination, biases exist in different forms. How can we identify these, and how can we react to them in a manner that, wouldn't create chaos or any antagonism? Anyone can, jump on and start it off.
I wanna talk about. There's this thing called like the model minority theory, which basically says, and it has to do with like a lot of old laws from this country that were meant to like indicate who could come here. They're based in old immigration laws, and it's this idea that there are if you're gonna not be from here and come here, we have a preference, right? We'd rather you be educated. So even like I think as recent as like the 60s or the 70s, when they were letting people come from India, they were looking specifically for people from a particular caste system from India. So you had to have a specific background, like you had to make some type of money, had to be in certain professions, because the idea that when you come here, you have to contribute something and prove your worth. You have to validate your worth, really. And you see it a lot. It's a subconscious thing that works in, say, like the Asian American community. That's very prevalent as well. And so when you talk about biases and I forgot what the other word you used was, but
discrimination.
Thank you. Yeah, when you talk about biases and discrimination, I would have to say that one of the things we have to do better about is being incredibly reflective. Like I think back on my high school year, like being in high school, which was not that long ago, and wish I was as reflective as I am now, so that I could change some of my attitudes and behavior, not just towards other people, but even like Black people as well, because you fall into, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the times in which where, now that I think about it, I'm able to better recognize my Blackness in retrospect, we're in those spaces of so-called opportunity, right? But those spaces contribute very much to the model minority method, which tokenizes you. And tokenism is the idea that, again, if you're going to be in a if we want one black person to be our piece of diversity, we want it to be you because you work hard, you went to school, you listened to your teachers, you never got in trouble, you're very, a lot of the things that African parents want. It's true. There's nothing wrong with being like that. But a lot of what happens is that you're pitted against other black people, right? So again, as I mentioned, one of the things that we have to be is incredibly reflective to the point of like overly so, because then we were able to better recognize how we react and respond to the biases and discrimination, not even just towards white people, other people of non-black people of color, but to ourselves. Because I think back to like here they have these things called like Black student unions, and what typically happens is that you'll find them mostly in schools that don't have a lot of black presence. It's supposed to be like that space for black students, and I don't remember being incredibly too active in mine. And when I think about it now, I realize I wasn't too active in terms of like the black spaces of my school. It was so called diverse, but that's just because like out of all the other schools in the district, we happen to have like the smaller percentage of white people compared to everybody else, and that automatically made it diverse. I don't really know how the math works on that. But I remember there's a particular stairway that was called Little Africa in my high school. Like now when I think about it, it sounds ridiculous. And there's not even that many students. It's probably a collective of like maybe 30 students, and they all ended up graduating like at least 2 years after I got there. But it was called Little Africa, and then you had Little Mexico. Like I'm like, first of all, that's ridiculous. Like that's rude. Secondly, I distinctly remember like going out of my way to avoid that space. Right? Most of these kids were also not even just like black students. They were immigrant students. Like they were people whose parents and themselves just recently came to the States, much like myself. But I was like, I'm in path to college success, like I get good grades, I'm going on college trips, like I don't really have time to be a part of Little Africa. And I don't even sound, because I've been here since I was 7, I don't even sound like that. I barely have an accent. Like I used to be a little defensive when people would be like, you said that weird. Okay, hold up. I've been here since I was 7. You cannot tell me I say things weird. I don't have an accent. Just defensiveness. So again, when we reflect on ourselves, we're able to recognize that. Do you get defensive when someone says something that indicates the fact that you're not from here? When someone points out your otherness, how do you react to other Africans, right? How do you react to other immigrant groups? Because again, are you trying to be that model that is allowed and validated in white spaces? So when it comes to biases and discrimination, unfortunately, sometimes we don't have to look further than ourselves to see that we're contributing to it. And then we're doing the white man's job, right? Like, why would I come sit here if you're your own people? Because it's even more discouraging. Like, I expect it from the white person, but when I'm new here and I'm an immigrant, I just came from Ghana or some other African country, and I see someone like me and I'm expecting them to, bring me into the fold and really teach me, it's 10 times more discouraging and demoralizing to know that they're not working with the same mindset, right? Because in the video I shared that in 6th grade, if I think back now, was one of the first like little light bulbs for me of, oh, this is different. Because this girl, I grew up with her the same apartment complex for like years, and she goes, I don't know what we're talking about. She goes, well, I'm African American. Her family's from Detroit, and you're African. Like that's just different. I don't know. I can't remember what we're talking about now, but till this day, like I literally wrote my college essay about it because it was just such a poignant moment for me and a memorable moment for me of someone distinctly making that separation of to be black is not to be African American, and to be African American is not to be African, and all these little pieces and boxes that people have to fit in. So when we sit back and we think about ourselves, the different spaces that we're in, we're able to recognize that one, this is how I'm being treated, and two, what are my responses and my reaction? What kind of person do I want to be? And what are the systems that I'm perpetuating, or what are the, and we have to educate ourselves, right? Like, if you didn't know what the model minority method is, God bless you for being here today because now you've learned it, and you'll sit back and recognize that, maybe your kids or you yourself have been feeding into that and they didn't even have a name for it. So educating ourselves and being reflective, I would say, are two of the things that we can, do really, really well to set ourselves apart, but also be there for one another. Sorry, that was a long tirade.
That is fine. We are learning a lot from your intervention. So we would all leave here today with a concept called model minority theory. That is something to think about, to reflect on, and to internalize that. We also have to be reflective on what we do and how we help perpetuate what we have today in our spaces. So we have to be mindful of that. We also contribute in so many ways to discrimination. So Vicky wants us to know about that. Thank you, Vicky, for bringing that to light. Yeah, so another person wants to jump in.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick, Francis.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, so to what Vicky mentioned, I think wanting to be reflective and educate yourself, it doesn't matter who you are. We all have biases, right? What we like, what we don't like. When you see somebody, your initial impression, that is affected by your bias. And so, one, being able to recognize that will teach you a whole lot about how you are, I guess, your level of interaction with that person is not by default what should be normal because something else is influencing it. And so you expand that to other avenues of our social structure. You think about how a doctor will perceive their patient who looks different, right? How a teacher who is teaching an immigrant kid might perceive them differently, or how does somebody else perceive, a woman who wears a hijab? That is all influenced by various biases and implicit or explicit. You just have to acknowledge it and actively work to, whatever it is that you tend to do that makes that interaction beyond normal. You work to reverse that. And sometimes you just cannot do that, but acknowledge it. Even doing that in the first place will take you a long way. And secondly, I think a lot of us tend to go quiet once you learn about or once you're set up in a space where somebody even explicitly discriminates against you for whatever reason. And I think one of the ways that we can empower each other is one, understand what is happening, right? And two, learn to know how to respond to it. What are the structures in place for you to? Is it reporting that through your workplace? How do you address that? Is it a peer support network or what have you? And so let's just be mindful of that. Learn to acknowledge that within yourself, within the workplace, and also know how to respond to it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We should learn to, to understand our environment, to be able to identify these, explicit and implicit biases. We should understand them, learn how to address them. If we have to fall on peers or our hierarchy to be able to address them, that will be very, very helpful. We shouldn't walk away when we experience these things. We should rather find a better way of articulating that, and that would ignite, that would start, the conversation towards the change that we want. Thank you very much, Eric. Yeah, so Dennis, on this.
So a lot has been said. Can you guys hear me well? I was having issues with my microphone.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
A lot has been said, and I don't want to make it any longer than it needs to be, but pretty much just being aware of it, reflecting, and seeing what we can do differently. I mean, we all experience it. I mean, I've experienced it in my workplace, whether it's coming from me to someone or from someone to me. I do acknowledge that. Victoria sharing her examples. Like at one point, we had a group of foreign kids where every time they will come together, I will always tell them that, oh, we're about to have a United Nations party. And I honestly, the intent, right, versus impact, that's another piece. The microaggression that's happening there, that's another issue. And so we just have to recognize it, be aware of it, and make sure that the impact is not affecting somebody's well being in a lot of ways. I think a lot of the issues with what is it, biases, implicit or explicit, that happens in the workplace can be very toxic, especially when you leave your home. I always say this: your workplace is your second home. You spend a lot of time there. You want to be in a place where you're happy to be. You enjoy the work that you do there, and you leave happy. And so when some of these things happen, it can be a damper. And oftentimes for me, I think I have a very difficult issue addressing some of these issues at my workplace. I don't want to be that Black girl that complains about everything. I strive very hard to be the double minority in my workplace. My contract says I need to be there at 7:05. I am there at 6:30 in the morning. Everybody leaves at 2:05. I am there till 4 p.m. I mean, you ask me to volunteer, I'm there. I don't. And so one time, one of my evaluator had told me, "You are what you are spreading yourself too thin. You're involved in everything. You're doing everything." And I was like, "Yeah, I like to help. I get." And after that conversation, I go, "Yeah, I mean, because I have to work hard. I mean, I cannot be caught slipping as a person of color. I mean, I work in a building where 70% of my staff is white, and out of that 70%, there is 5% people of color, and so we stick out. And so when it's easy for other people to get away with things, when a Black person does it, it's noticeable. And so there are questions like, "Oh, why are you here so early? Don't you encounter traffic?" I go, "No, I just plan. I'm very strategic with what I do. I get to work, and my colleagues stroll in at 7:10, and they don't even blink, but I couldn't do that." And it also goes so it comes from a place where these are the things our parents instill in us, right? It's culturally what we are told to do. You work hard, work hard, work hard. You go to school, get a good job. When you get a good job, work hard, work hard. And so that's what we do. But then once you're there and working hard, eventually you realize that as a person of color, you have to work as hard, and you can't complain. You can't afford to complain. And so oftentimes I try to see the good in the people that I work with, because I know they mean well. Um, I've had people say to me, "You are the coolest Black person I know." And I'm like, "Oh my God, is that a compliment, or is that microaggression? What is that supposed to be?" But I know they meant well. It's just, I mean, it just didn't come out right. And so I just give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, in a lot of situations, because I try not to be offended by everything that is said in my place of employment. Because if I do take it personal, I will quit and not go back. And so some behave, I mean, depending on the level of comfort, I can address certain things. But I'm like, and not necessarily in the moment, because I just kind of take a different opportunity to tell the person, this time when you said this, I kind of didn't appreciate it. And I just try to do it in a way where I want to be able to work with you. I just don't want you to feel that I don't want you to have this in the back of your mind whilst we work together. So I would appreciate it if you don't say it again. And it's some I don't address completely at all, because I don't even know how to go around it. When somebody asks you, so one of the first questions I was asked was, when I take a shower, does the brown come off my skin? And it was up until today. I cannot believe the person felt comfortable enough to ask me that question. And so I guess a part of me did not address it. I said, "No, it doesn't. I hope it does not." And so a part of me never addressed it with the person, because I just didn't know how to navigate that conversation. It was awkward for me, and I can only imagine what it would have been like for um, that person. But one thing I always do not hesitate to do is telling people, when people say like, "Oh my God, when that issue of race came up, it made me a little uncomfortable." And I just have to remind them, your 5 minutes of being uncomfortable is better than our lifetime of living uncomfortable. So just endure that person for the next 5 minutes, and you can go about your life and live your life. But remember, we have to take this goal and live with it wherever we go. I mean, when I first started working in my place, I was my job. Everybody thought I was a student, not because I look young. I mean, all people ask me, "You're the counselor? Is she the?" And then they will ask one of our secretaries, "Is she the counselor?" And it's kind of like, "Oh, she's young." And then one of the students said, "And she's black." Fascinating that this is happening. This is happening. This is happening in these times. And so it's just I typically just I look on the bright side, turn into a much more positive conversation where I'm just like, yeah, believe it or not, I am, and I'm not 18, just to be able to move past that. But I tell them to, when we work together, you get to see why I'm the person I am and why I'm here and why um, me being the only black person in this office of counselors is good for your student. And so just bringing in different perspectives. But I try not to dwell on it. I try not to get my feelings hurt, because then it will make me lose sight of the work that I set out to do, which is making sure that underrepresented and kids of color are very represented in our education system.
Yeah. Before we move on, I just wanted to quickly add to about, the bit about educating yourself, not just like, on immigration laws and stuff like that and different ideas, but also on just like African American history. Like, you cannot be in this country. I don't care how early you migrated. I don't really care. Like, it doesn't matter, right? There's no excuse. I think you really truly cannot live in America and most other places. Like, you cannot live in Europe. I recognize that when I went to France. I'm like, I cannot be in this country and not understand the presence of, black people and slavery. But here particularly, so before we move on to, I don't know if it was going to come up again, but just to make sure that it was touched upon, I really want to encourage all of us. I don't know how many of us here are Ghanaians. If we're not, still educate yourself. It's so important because, when they get to the slavery part, it's like a little paragraph in the textbook. I remember in 5th grade, it was like a tree word. They didn't know how to say it. And I just naturally blurted it out and everybody turned to look at me. And I think for a lot of people, that's when they recognized that I wasn't like American. They're like, oh, she's African, which was kind of awkward. But again, please just like take the time to educate yourself on, it can be as simple as watching some of these movies that come out. They're very informative. They may be a bit dramatized, but they're based in something, especially the ones where they're always like based on a true story. Like, I implore y'all, if you're a visual learner, to even just tap into those, because it helps us relate to one another. And it also helps us like bridge that gap and fix those discriminations and biases that we have towards African Americans, because it's there, like it's in our community so strongly. And even in like the use of the word akata, it wasn't until last year that I recognized that for many, if not almost all African Americans, it is a derogatory term. It's almost as bad, if not the same as being called a Negro, right? So we just have to recognize that. Again, how do we keep these systems going that are being a problem for all of us, that are being a barrier for all of us? So I just wanted to bring that up before we moved on to the next point.
Thank you, Vicky, and thank you, Benis, for clarifying these. That's very important. We need to be educated, about ourselves and about our history and about the history of the African American people as well. Very important, Vicky. And I will use this platform to suggest to Garcia to extend this, to, African Americans as well, so that it will be a dialogue, between, people from the continent and people from here, and not only, the Ghanaian community in Seattle, even though, we invited others as, people of color to join. But I would suggest that, we make it intentional to have it as a real dialogue between, these two groups. It's very important. And what Benny said that, I want us to take away is that, you have to be a double minority person. And, I was in Arizona and a pastor preached about one Ghanaian called Kofi. He got a job, and in the job, his work was pretty flexible. And so they would tell him, Kofi, do this. No, he himself actually went around and tell people that, if you have something to do, let me help you do it. And so he would go to work early, finish his work, and then, someone would say, Kofi, come and do this thing for me. Kofi, come and do this thing for me. Kofi, come and do this. All the departments, they knew Kofi and they sent him on errands. And within a short period of time, they were looking for someone to hire in the management position. And they required the person to have expertise in the various departments. And none of the people had that, opportunity. But because Kofi volunteered to work for, those people in the different departments, he stood out and was, given that particular job. So, Benny, thank you for bringing that up. We should, do the double, go beyond the limit, stretch beyond the limit, and we will be able to stand out. And she also talked about, compliment versus microaggression. We should, try to be able to understand these differences so that we will be able to work comfortably at our various workplaces. We have been talking for almost 45 minutes. I will open it to the participants. If you have questions, you can, just raise your hand and we will allow you to ask your question. It can be questions to what has been discussed so far, or any question that bothers your mind, and then we continue. If anyone doesn't have a question, I have more questions for our expert panelists who are not tied to answer my questions. Yeah, so you can also type your questions if you don't want to talk, but I know that a lot of people here would want to talk, so you can channel your questions the way you want.
There's a question.
Okay.
From a Jonathan. I'm assuming it's a Jonathan. It's a John Asamoah.
Okay, Jonathan Asamoah, raise your hand.
Yeah,
thank you.
Jonathan is too long to type, so I just say John.
Okay, thanks, John.
So
yes.
It's not like, it's more like a comment, than a question.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky, Eric, and Bernice for your contribution. It's really like, it was very informative, right? And one thing that I found across everything the three of you said is that, especially when Bernice was talking about how, she finds it difficult trying to address certain things like this when she encounters them. It's a great point Vicky talked about in terms of like educating yourself and all that. And then, so for me, what I like, the comment I want to make, or like maybe a little contribution, is like when these things happen, or when you encounter like a situation like that where somebody is exhibiting their ignorance from making certain comments like that, right? First of all, before that even happens, we know that, the situation, or like, that we're in right now, like in the country. And overall, generally just have a, like, be empathetic, right, to those people. And then when things like that happen, see it as an opportunity to educate them. So after you've educated yourself, like learn about it. I mean, like how Vicky said, there are a lot of movies that really educate us about all these things. There are some people that still, haven't educated themselves, and, they're still stuck in that, old mentality or whatever, like who, whatever they know from however long. And it's pretty difficult, I'm not gonna lie, because I'm pretty sure each and every one of us have encountered situations like that where people make very ignorant comments that is very disrespectful, and your first reaction to it is, to hit back. But if you have like, the spirit of like empathy, you can like look at it from the point of view, okay, like they don't know what you know, they haven't experienced what you have experienced. So this is an opportunity to actually try to impart knowledge. So because we've come a long way, like in terms of like, racism in this country, right? Where we are right now wasn't how it was like maybe 20, 30 years ago. So the only way we can like help move like, this forward is to try to be not feed into the stereotype, you know what I'm saying? And then like be more empathetic and then like, you know, educate people, talk about it, like be open to have, just like you were saying, be open to having, you know, a dialogue with people. Because most of the time you realize that a lot of like the information people or the knowledge like people in this country have is based on what is shown to them on TV, right? And most of us like that grew up back in Africa or Ghana, for instance, most of the movies that we watch, like, you know, have paint like African Americans really bad, like evil or black, and it's like all about gangs and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So they like they have a different untrue like image of Africans, right? From what they've seen, from what like you know the media has shown them, and then we also have a different what before we come here and experience them, right? So put yourself in their shoes, you know, and then like use that as an opportunity to, you know, try and educate them too, like about everything that you know about yourself, and then listen to where they're coming from because we have our struggles and they also have their struggles. You know what I'm saying? Like what they've gone through. So, I mean, that's the little bit that I want to add to like what everybody has said, you know, not to like repeat what anybody, like what everybody has already said.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for your intervention. I think at least one thing that we can take away from what you just said is, you know, when people make those ignorant comments, we should be empathetic and use the opportunity as a teachable moment to educate them, you know, about our lived experiences. Thank you very much. Someone wants to know a little bit more about the topic, and I think that Vicky has provided succinct response to that. Yeah, essentially what is happening, how can we contribute in one way or the other, you know, to making the change that we all hope to, you know, have as Black people living in this, you know, space. That is essentially what the discussion is about. You know, some of us, we want to contribute, but we don't know how. And so that is what we want to learn from the experts, how we can, you know, contribute to the struggle or to the change that we desire.
Francis, can I jump in here real quick?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, John, thank you for that comment. I think a lot of times, you know, just because people tend to be one, not sure of how to respond to these incidents, and so they either walk away from it and just refuse to address it, right? One of the ways to do it is to show empathy because that opens you up and allows that person to listen. But also understand that the system that you're working in, we live in a very litigious society, right? And so everything is about law and what policies and procedures are available and what have you done and what have you followed, right? In the long term, understand that should something happen, there's going to be a record of what you reported and what you failed to report, right? And so all that is great, but also understand that documentation is necessary. And so have you gone to what do you call your human resources folks with some of these concerns? The first time maybe you addressed it, what was the response? The second time, the third time, maybe you need to go to HR and you know, create a trail of documentation that at some point you can fall back on if things kind of blow out of proportion. But I totally believe that show empathy and be open to just addressing things at just the smallest and basic level, which is one-on-one.
Thank you very much. Very important documentation. Very, very important. It can be, you know, email. It can be written note. It can be, you know, pictures taken. You know, yeah. But I understand recording. You have to get the permission of the person. But taking video, you don't have to. Eric made us know about that when he came for the first series. Thank you, for that. Two people have raised their hands. Someone asked a question from YouTube. Let's address that and come to the two questions. So from YouTube, what are some suggestions for raising awareness for children about race in the United States?
Oh, I was gonna, I have something to speak to that YouTube question. There's
Okay.
I mean, yeah, there's a video on YouTube. I feel like I'm speaking twice, but there's a video on YouTube called "A Class Divided," and it's about a white female teacher teaching her kids about racism and just using different concepts in the classroom. I've watched that video several times, even in my adult life, to get a better understanding. And I think it is since she's using kids, it's a very old video, and so she's using white kids in her classroom and teaching them the concept of race. And then once she's done, these are adults now. They're adults, and then they speak to their experiences with the video back then. I think it is a great video for kids to watch, depending on the age, because I think it must have been like a first or a second grade class. She just did a social experiment with the kids, and so it's a great video to have. I mean, once my son is old enough, that's one of the videos I'm going to show him to be able to have conversations about. And so giving kids the opportunity to, but I will advise the parents should watch the video first to see if it's material that they want their kids to watch, because obviously they have autonomy over what their kids can see. But have kids watch the video and come up with questions as far as what they see in the video that they want to talk about more in your home with your family, because I think it's very, very important that as an African community, we start having conversations about race with our kids. We raise them with that empathy bone to be able to understand their reality and where they live, the things, I mean, the things they can and cannot do. They have to know these things. And so being able to understand it. And that video does a great job of teaching kids about just not treating each other differently just because of what is it, the color of a person's skin, which in her video she used the color of their eyes. So that's a good resource video I would recommend.
And I would also like to add books. So as I mentioned, just like Bernie said, depending on the age and your kids and what you decide. But for instance, my older sister, again, she's gone through like her last batch of pre-K to kindergarten books. So we have to order new ones because she's going in first grade, she's feeling herself or whatever. And there's, and again, back to when we educate ourselves and when we do research, there has been such a wide movement to generate content specifically for Black kids for the sake of this purpose. So I think we bought like 9 books, and there was just one that she was interested in just because of the topic, not necessarily because of anything else. But I think the other 8 were all have something to do with, being a Black person in that context. So there's this series of like that teaches kids how to make decisions and they learn consequences, but the character's a Black student, right? So in that series there'll be different students, but most of them are Black kids. So even in that context, she's not only learning about decision making and consequences, she's learning them with this image of someone who looks like her, right? So I think once she's ready to go out in the world or continues to learn in the classroom setting, whatever, even if it's not necessarily you're a Black kid, you can't do X, Y, and Z. I think it's just a confidence boost in decision making. And when you're able to confidently make decisions as you look, like you operate in a particular skin, in a particular system within this country. And I'm unfortunately to say this, it's kind of like blood in the water with sharks. They can smell your lack of confidence. Like if you have no idea what you're talking about in the classroom setting, it automatically becomes because she's Black, affirmative action, da da da. I got into almost all my colleges that I wanted to go, and someone still had the nerve to tell me they let anybody into college these days. What? After all the work I'd put in, they let anybody into college? Are you serious? But that's okay. And so I would just recommend the books like Amazon. There are specifically bookstores online that are meant for, again, getting Black books. There's short stories. And somebody's mentioned that we've come a long way. And in some ways it's kind of bad, but in many, many ways it's good for us in terms of representation and, perception in media about Black kids. Like Disney just released a short like they do these short movies, and it's about a dad who had experience taking care of his little girl's hair. Now she's a black girl with bushy hair, and it's a lot of work to tame. And the mom's not around, so the dad has to do it, and they go through this whole experience together. And he ended up writing a book. Now she's 6. She wants to know how to do her hair, whatever. She's going out to classrooms where she sees, blonde hair, blue eyed, or really nicely put together rings of curly hair that are manageable. And hers is hers. It's beautiful, but it's hers, and that you don't want her to feel any type of way about it. And these all go into race. Like the issue of race comes up when you discuss hair. The issue of race comes up when you discuss decision making. The issue of race comes up everywhere. So for Na, who asked the question of like if we're talking about racism, not necessarily like the system itself, but also everything that is within it and surrounds it, which is everything, right? When you come to money, you learn how to do that. When it comes to science, so we bought her some science books too, and it's all about Black inventors and putting yourself in the space of possibly becoming an inventor and contributing to our world, which we need so many things. So just like the video, I would recommend that to Bernice. And there's been PSAs coming out, especially after a lot of the uprise in police brutality, particularly towards young Black men. There are so many videos called The Talk. So in the past, The Talk was like, when you have the sex talk with your kids. But now, as a Black parent, the scope of The Talk has shifted to having to have these conversations with your kids, because it's not like the 60s or the 70s where if your kid walks out, there are literally signs that tell them how undervalued they are, right? For colored people, this is Blacks only, this is whites only. Here, it's so hidden. As far as we've come, the system has also gotten better at hiding it. So you need to have the talk with your kids, like you need to be able to like tell them, you have to open your eyes to see the space for what it is, because it's not going to be a sign anymore. It's not like a for colored people sign. It's not like a Black, they're not writing it out anymore. They're quietly and subliminally projecting it out to you. And if you're not careful, you'll fall in a trap and just find yourself in very difficult spaces. So I recommend books, and very much like Bernice, I recommend these videos. There's a lot of groups that form. There's a lot of groups where parents are also having this discussion amongst themselves, like, oh, my child just experienced this. How did you handle it? I want help. I want to know how to navigate it as well. I'm not a parent, but I come across a lot of these things. So that's another thing that I would suggest as well.
I was going to say, real quick, some of these books, so I don't know, and it has to be a common thing. So with school districts, they always have a contract with the local libraries. Like my school district has a contract with the local library. And so a lot of my books, I get them for free through the local library. So you don't necessarily have to pay for them if you don't want to. I love me free resources any day, because educators, we spend our money on a bunch of other things anyway. So if you can always ask your school, what is the affiliation with the local library? Because every student in my district, your student ID number gives them access to your local library and neighboring libraries where they can get books from. And if they can't find a book in this library, they can look in the other books. And also, it's very, Victoria and Eric said it, it's very important that we look and read these history stuff, because to be honest with you, Black history is not being taught in our education system in this country. They don't teach Black history. They don't teach rich Black history culture stuff in our districts. And so accessing those resources to be able to help all of us, I mean, you get informed, your kids get informed. I mean, I know one thing I was going to say, the Francis keeps saying, we're not experts. We are here to learn in a lot of ways. Like I have to say, Dr. Amos Wilson, I don't know who he is, but I just added him to my list of people that I need to read material from. And so we are also open to hearing what some people are reading out there to be able to build our library also. But there's free resources out there on with local public libraries where they can provide you books and resources to be able to look at. And with everything that's happening, there's been a lot of attention being focused on minority writers. So books by African Americans, and like I've had to tell some of my students, you need to start looking up Samoan writers. What are they writing about? What are the challenges in your community? Just so that they can be well informed. So the knowledge, I hate this statement. If you want to hide something from a Black person, put it in a book, has been used several times. And to be honest, I mean, I love reading. And if you, I mean, I love reading and listening to books, listening to podcasts, and coming to find out a lot of things that are in those pages but we have to go seek it for ourselves, right? They're not going to bring it into our schools for us to learn because knowledge is power. When you educate people on what you have done to them, of course you have to worry about the consequences that's going to come out of it. So some knowledge is held back for a reason. We have to go look for it, not to fall ourselves in a negative light, to be able to educate ourselves in a positive way. One of the last couple of weeks, well, prior to COVID, my infatuation with the Tulsa, Oklahoma bombing and Black Wall Street. It's amazing to know that if that did not happen, the things that Black people will be doing in this country would have been phenomenal. And so those are the things that are out there for us that we have to, unfortunately, we have to go search for ourselves. And there are free resources out there with those materials and content for kids and adults. Just check with your local school district. They do have access to the public libraries to provide all those resources for free. And if they don't, then eventually I end up on Amazon buying my books myself. So yeah.
Let me jump in here, Francis.
All right, go for it.
So on as far as recommendations for kids, so with my very limited exposure so far in law enforcement, there's something that I've noticed, right? You're driving around in your patrol car and almost every white kid you see actively waves at you and acknowledges you. And more often than not, they want you to stop, hand out a sticker, say hello. That is not the same with a Black kid. That tends to be an active avoidance. Like we don't want anything to do with you. I don't know you. You are somebody that is a threat to me. Of course, that is not spoken, right? But that is what I perceive. And so I think we need to actively teach our kids how to interact with people in power, and not necessarily in power, but as far as what they mean to them. And so, for instance, as a police officer is there to serve you. Unfortunately, what we're seeing lately hasn't communicated that to our brothers and sisters of color. But what that shouldn't mean is that we totally remove ourselves from interacting with these arms of government, the judicial systems, the prison systems. We need our kids to see these things for what they are. And so what I encourage is, mentorship. We need more people of color that are represented in these spaces to actually teach and educate our smaller ones. Just show them that, this is how it should be, not what you've seen, not how you've been taught, because more often than not, parents educate their kids based off of their fears, based off of their misapprehensions and all their biases, right? And so the kid grows up also feeling the same. Not to say that those beliefs are not true, but I also want the kid to be exposed to other avenues of thought. So pair them up with a mentor in law enforcement, in the military, in the judicial system, because it is so easy to find an African in medicine, right? It's easy to find that. It's easy to find an African in engineering. You can't say the same for something like law. You can't say the same for law enforcement. And so we have to actively recruit into those positions. And we are already late on that because we're seeing what happens when people are not comfortable in situations like that. And so we can't totally avoid that space.
Thank you very much for your interventions. Yeah, so two people have their hands raised, and then another person also wants to contribute to this. So I'll call on Judah Abena to ask your question, and after that, someone on the iPhone that the name has not appeared to also ask his or her question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sabina, and I'm glad that everyone is saying we are not an expert over here, but we are all learning or something like that. If we really want to learn, I think, I think we are tackling the cases from the stem instead of the root. You know, what we're doing right now, it's good, it's better, but we need to go to the grassroots. Racism, I think we're learning from our own homes, you know, um, from from our parents, you know. You're staying home, your parents will talk to you, hey, this Akata people, hey, this Akata people, hey, this Mexican people, you know. The main source is from the root in our own home. So talking about education, going to the libraries, getting resources here. How many of our parents can get those resources? Get to know. My, my mom, my mom sells appetition. Tell me how my mom can go to the library and get resources. The first time I taught my mom how to write her name, and I just laughed because she couldn't pronounce the R word well. I had a knock on my head, like a knock, like auntie untumi yesa. So we need to stay home. Our parents have already made up their mind. Not that they've made up their mind, but is the fear of them protecting us from what they've heard or know. So if we want to go on the street preaching all these things, let's start handling it from our home, from our parents who has educated us. So now it's time for us to educate them in such a way that it's it's I don't know how to put it, but you cannot go and just tell your mom, hey, auntie, you have to do this. Hey, auntie, you know, it's a gradual thing. We need to start being um we need to start teaching our own parents at home, you know, because if my mom is saying Akata, there's no way I will know Akata until I hear it from home. And then who is an Akata? You know, as soon as you see a black person on the street, oh, Shakata, look at the way they're dressed, you know. So racism is literally coming from our home. We are getting the poison from our home and we are infusing it into the society, thinking later on we become like the victims. Oh, they looked at me this way. Oh, I talk this way. Oh, I do this way. You know, it's the way our home we're being taught at home too. You know, it's not like once upon a time we just came and now we are the victims. You know, our parents have used words in our own homes that are really really terrible. That we shouldn't even repeat it to our own self more of less to our or to our peers or something like that. So now, how are we going to tackle that? What resources are we going to give to our parents who cannot read and write? What is our resources? So if we're doing this and we are not all experts, is there people over here that can give us resources? Oh, until we can do this. Oh, we can do some sort of forum for our mothers, our grandparents that are here because not all of us have all these grandparents or all these mom. They can also learn and pass it on, and it becomes like a generational thing. We need to tackle it from the roots and not always from the stem. You know, we can get along, we can fake, we can smile, you know, but within us, when we go back home, hmm, it's something different. Thanks, guys.
Francis, are you going to, or do you want me to? There was a comment that says that I think there's a conflation of racism and discrimination, and I want to add prejudice as well. So I definitely understand what you're saying, but as Bernice said, like knowledge is power, and a part of that knowledge is knowing the language of what you're dealing with. And so, like, there's this argument that most people, particularly like white supremacists and like Republicans, try to make about the idea of reverse racism, which means that, you know, as a black person or a person of color, you can be racist. Now, just to understand, like racism is a systemic issue. So if you ever hear a black person say, "Oh, I can't be racist," but you've seen them be rude or say some like out of pocket comments, now they're prejudiced and they're discriminatory, which is wrong. but their comment about how they cannot be there, like there's no such thing as reverse racism is very valid, because that word is a system based upon race, right? It's a system that is predicated on race. And so you have to have a certain level of power and influence in order to make that like the functioning tool of that system. So the reason why Nas comment about earlier about what we're talking about, I just was like, oh, we're talking about everything, is because in this country, if this country is a wheel, the thing that makes it turn is racism, right? Like in many, many ways, if this country is a wheel, the thing that makes it go the way that it does is a system of racism in which, in the history of it, has been the white oppressor finding ways and means such as like immigration laws or like voting rights, gerrymandering, et cetera, you know, police forces. The history of the police, the reason why many African Americans feel so strongly. I've seen someone cry at the presence of a police officer because in their history, they've had grandparents and great grandparents who weren't too far away, who there is literally a photo of them being held by a patrolman, a slave patrolman, who were then the police, right? So I think we also have to be very understanding of our comments about, you know, you're right, we can be very discriminatory. I mentioned that earlier because I was the one who mentioned that kata thing earlier. Like, our parents can use some out of pocket comments. Our community says some things out of pocket. We can be very judgmental and be very prejudiced. But again, in wanting to harness our power through our knowledge, we have to be very aware of the languages that come with this fight as well. And so not this is in no way saying like what you just said. Everything you said, I 100% agree. You know, we're doing the work in our own homes and in our own communities and in our own spaces, but let's also know the language and the words that go around with that, so that once we are actually actively fighting the fight, we know how to respond when people come at us in that way. Because if you're thinking that, you know, what your mom is saying is racist, and if a white person came up to them and called them racist, you're in this weird, awkward spot of thinking you're living with a racist. You're not. Your mom has no systematic power to change anything in this country, right? However, on one with an individual, she does have a lot of power to influence how that person is living their life. So we do have to be aware of that. But on a larger scale, especially within the context of this discussion, let's just also like know the language of the fight that we're fighting. And I don't know any other neater way to wrap that up. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, thank you for clarifying that, Vicky. And I'm not sure when you hopped on the forum, but initially we did talk at length about sort of educating and reflecting on ourselves, our individual biases that we have, and that comes from our cultural upbringing and everything that we learned growing up. And so those are things that we've discussed at length, but without question, there have been some very discriminatory comments and positions that, you know, our family and people that we hold dear have made. I'm not gonna sit here and talk about those, but we are aware of those. But that is not to say that we can't affect change from addressing these issues that we are seeing, especially more so now.
Thank you. There's someone on the iPhone. Have unmuted the person. Can you ask your question? From there, we'll go to AC and we go to Richmond. Benjamin.
Oh, actually, the iPhone person is me. It's AC.
Okay.
A little contribution. This is such a good topic that we are actually discussing about, and now more and more of our generation is trying to bridge out and do other things rather than the typical go to nursing school. Now we have, like, my own brother, Eric, is now a police officer, which is awesome. He'll be able to educate us more on that field, you know. We have our own sister Bernice, who is into education. I mean, I relate to her in so many ways because I'm also a student support advocate at Everett School District, And so every single thing she was saying, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, sis. Like, I am right there with you. When she talked about, like, even being there, doing her job, and being mistaken for a student, I go through that every single day where I'll have a white, maybe senior that will come in, and then I will send them maybe take passes down to whatever classroom for me. And then they look at me crazy like, who are you? Like, who do you think you are to be giving me a pass to go give it to another student? Why don't you take it? And we have good coworkers that will come out and be like, she's actually a staff, so go ahead. And it should not be that way. A person of color should not have to feel as though like I need to be humiliated by, the student just because of my color, or even if I change my hair next week from going short to long, it has to be the topic of the whole unit or the whole building. And so it's kind of like a good feeling to know that now we are changing, the way we want society to see us, because it's also a really good feeling knowing that that black student can come in and relate to a counselor or student support advocate, that she wouldn't feel comfortable going to a white person or a white counselor talking to them about certain stuff. Most of the time they can't even relate to us. And even beginning of the year, I told myself I need to find a black doctor. I need someone that can relate to me as a woman. I need people. And so we need to push the younger generations as well, even if it gets to a point where we need to go into like go to the church, try to talk to the younger generations. Like Eric can probably one day suggest I will put on my uniform, come into our community, and kind of like, just like you were talking, a white kid can stop a cop and that white kid can get a sticker. A black kid is so scared. you know a black kid will not have that ability to even want to look at an officer's face. Meanwhile, there are good ones out there, you know? And so for us that have the upper hand, that are now well educated in so many areas, we should be able to go into our communities and talk to the younger generations. And also through that, our parents will also like notice that, okay, yeah, maybe we should, be less soft on them and think about other, positions in the community, other things that the kids can also do to bring awareness, to be able to connect with the younger generations that are also coming. Now, I heard someone talk about educating the parents as well. That is very true, but I think from a point of view, what Bernice was trying to say is that we have these resources as well too. Some people might not know that there are these kind of resources available to us, and so those that are in those positions to be able to know those resources, we should take those resources, work on it. We can read and also, talk to our parents about it, watch videos, with them, probably, YouTube videos, whatever we've read, educate them in those ways. And I'll also throw a challenge out there to also go into other communities, even if it's the white community. I have brought white people into our community. I'm like, you think I'm a really cool black person? Well, wait till you go into my community. You're going to meet a whole bunch of cool black people. But not everybody will be cool as well. We'll have our people in our community that will sit and gossip. Hey, Brony, yeah, the Bronia by, we've brought a white person here. Well, maybe that white person have opened up their hearts, want to get to know us. And so we need to open up our hearts too to get to know them as well. Another thing we talked about, like books and all that stuff. There's something that I've tried to, talk to the Everett School District and all that stuff, people that I know within the Everett location. If you go to the Everett Public Library, there are about 4 huge books. All the people that wrote those books are by white authors. And I'm like, no, this is not okay. There's not even one black person's book that is in front of this library. And so if we are sitting here screaming, oh, we need inclusion, we need equity, we need all this, we need all that, then let's look around. And I think Victoria touched on this a little bit. Now it's not so obvious, but if you educate yourself, you're still getting to know signs that, oh no, this might not say black people are not allowed here, but indirectly, if you really look into it, that's pretty much what they're saying. So by educating ourselves and educating other people too, I think somehow it helps, because throughout my day when I go to work, when something comes up, I will say like, no, this is not the case. Like, you've got it wrong, in a very respectful way. And just like we've also talked about, empathy is very important. Putting ourselves in their shoes. In their homes, their parents have probably also taught them the same thing. Black people are this way, black people are that way, black people are that way. So that's all they know. So for us to put ourselves in their shoes, like, just like my mom will probably sit home and call Akata people, and not think she's being prejudiced or whatever the case might be, is the same way they're learning from home too. So you put yourself in their shoes and be like, maybe this person don't know. Let me educate them, because right now I'm at the same level as you. I've gone to school, I've got my degree. You've gone to school, you've got your degree. We do the same work. Your skin tone should not give you more of a power than mine. And therefore, if you're not going to educate yourself, that's fine with you. But if I have to share with you, like, this is my community, this is what it is about, because Africans, we are smart. If you look at the statistics, I think Africans makes the most percentage with people with good education, especially PhD and all that stuff. We have a good number of people that are Africans that are, in high positions and all that stuff. But most of the time, we are scared to like let people know that this is what I'm doing, because they might judge you. Oh, you didn't become a doctor, you didn't become a lawyer, you didn't become a engineer, and so they don't respect. And the churches still need to encourage that it is okay to go into different positions. The churches need to do that too. We don't need lawyers to be able to be respected in the churches, to be given high positions in the churches. So what we do at home will really affect how the kids are also gonna perceive themselves outside. If you give me the chance, I'll talk and talk. So I think I'll end.
Thank you so much, Lucy.
Oh, I was gonna, Francis, can you, I need 1 minute just to make a comment.
Sure.
With regards to educating our own parents. And Auntie Lydia also made a comment about how we can affect change. I mean, part of what was said before, right? It's not necessarily even referencing the Akata piece of it. Even culturally back home, you see certain cultures put other cultures down, right? It is in our nature. We've been doing this for years, but when you know better, you do better. I can only speak to my experiences over, the years after being in this country, going to school. One of the things I talk to my parents about race now more than ever, because it's a healthy conversation to have. And I always catch myself, and I do this with my parents all the time. Yankasasa, we don't talk like that. This is 2020. We have to have a growth mindset. And so and this has been an ongoing conversation with them, because that's where back in the day it was a matter of respect and listening to them, and not being the akolaboni and listen to what your child have to say. But one thing I appreciate is my parents being open to listen to what I have to say and learning from it. And so it's also little conversations at home. I enjoy talking to my parents about race. I enjoy calling them out when something is wrong. um, I enjoy when they call themselves out, because they know I'm about to call them out. And honestly, I'm married to an African American. Before being married to an African American, I got an earful about my parents' perceptions of African Americans. But seeing the people that they are now, after my experience and them going through my experience with me, I can see where I have affected a change in my household. Of course, this is my advice, to be able to have those conversations with your parents. I can't come to your mom and tell your mom in Kasasa, because she will scold me, especially in the church. Who do you think you're talking to? But we have to be comfortable with our parents to be able to have a conversation. And not, being in a place where I can have these conversations, not that I didn't respect my parents, but I've come to respect and appreciate them more, because they are open and they're willing to listen when every time, and it's not just them. It's my brothers. I have two brothers where they've also come to learn a lot of things, where we make sure we're having these conversations, because I have two male brothers, and they have been pulled over and unfortunately have encountered a bad situation with a terrible cop and guns drawn on them. And they're always in a place where it's like, how can we avoid the situation? So we try to foster those conversations among ourselves so that we are informed and not repeating what does not need to happen again. With just maintaining the things we have control over is what we try to control.
Thank you very much. I'm enjoying this so much that I don't even want time to, to move. I wish I could hold the time, but unfortunately that is not possible. So we have about 30 minutes more to go. And Richmond Ajuman has a question to ask. After that, if you have other questions, you let them come. Other than that, I will go with some few more questions to the panelists. So, Richmond?
Yes. Thank you very much, host. I guess I'm not being disciplined here because I decided to stay afar and watch your pundits, panelists give us thoughtful and informing messages. But it looks like you guys are honing on a topic that is so dear to me. So it looks like I'm emotionally triggered to get involved. But I won't actually suggest anything different. It looks like your panelists, including all the contributors, have actually said everything that it's in my mind. And I would hasten to add that Eric, Vicky, Benis, you guys are doing a great job. And to you, the host, for setting up this, platform, looking at the circumstances that we find ourselves in this country and the siege of, possible distraction that is driving the whole world into a ditch. Looking at the pandemic and the protests around the country and all that. But what I will actually say is that when I listen to all of you, everything points to one specific thing, which is people with Black descent has been given a new fate to live by. And do we have to accept that fate, or we can do something about it and make it something that is supposed to be, as opposed to being, conforming to what has been given to us by our friends coming from the other racial lines. And if, just as the model minority theory that Vicky pointed out, right? And the double minority theory that I guess Dennis, and then back to the host, Francis, the story that you gave regarding a guy that had to do all the company or the firm's errands so that he would get a managerial position. Like, it looks like a Black man or a person with color has to overperform in order to be noticed, recognized, and adored, right? And that, to me, gives us a lot of responsibility as a race, and it is a reality that we've been facing pretty much every day. And I wish I said this race that Benny said, that your 5 minutes is better than my lifetime, feeling uncomfortable because of all these things and all that. So I guess the solution to this, right, will come in a multiple fold. And the greatest of it all is what you guys are doing, right? Setting up a platform so that we can all hop on to get educated, get informed, right? Because once we get educated and informed and we begin to dialogue among ourselves, that is where we will find solutions to these problems that is eating away the fabric of our humanity. And another thing that Eric, I think, pointed out is the law, the application of the law, right? In this country, we know that there's a lot that goes against we the blacks, right? There's a lot, but on the other hand, I can also see that the law work to a certain limit. At least to say that the law work, than it is not, right? So resorting to the law and making sure we are checking all the boxes when it comes to discrimination and things like that will actually be part of the solution going forward. And I would say last that um, we need a community, right? If you are a race or a group of people and you don't have a supporting community, you are doomed. And as I look at the fate of the people with black descent in the United States, um, there is no a community backing for us, right? And every time, even if at our our tragedy, we fall on the same people we accuse as racist for support, right? And it's about time we begin to build a community that will make sure black people get into positions of power. Black people get into uh, positions that make policies for this country, right? Once we have a community that can rub shoulders with the white race, that is where we can make a headway. But I guess it will take us a long time to actually get there. For us to
Okay.
get like great multi-billion, you know, firms like Amazon, Facebook, and things like that, right? Or to get great personalities into positions of government and power. It will take us a long time, but I think it is not far fetched. We can get it, and I would say thank you very much for allowing me to jump on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rickmond, for your contribution. Yeah, that is why we are all here to learn and to, be able to apply what we learn here. And definitely, I also believe in economic empowerment, and that is the one of the most important ways that we can liberate ourselves totally. Elder Steve has a question or a comment to make. Yeah.
Thank you. It's not so much as a question or a comment, but I've been following, and I think I've been drawn very, very deep in, and I just want to just follow on the back of Mr. Richmond's comment about the community. I think for a few of you, and especially our police brother Eric, it's something you and I talk about at length a lot of times. And so I will just want to not to kind of take us from where we are going, but I just want to use this medium to appeal to everybody who is here listening that it takes stuff like this for us to come together. So I hope this won't end here, but it will be the beginning of us, especially in our small community as Ghanaians, because it will take we finding the resources among ourselves to start our own community, to be able to also get out of some of the things that we are uncomfortable with, and also to help us make some of the inroads or the benefits for which we are seeking, not only for ourselves, but also for especially the children, that have been born here, because for them, they may not be able to relate to the fact that they are Ghanaian, and think that way. But all they are going to see is they have been born here, and they are just going to see themselves as Black people first. But if they can have that sense of a strong community with all these things we are talking about, with the education, with the talk, then I think we would have done a better job. Because if we don't, and we leave them hanging, 20 years' time, it will be the same issue that we are facing right now. So please, 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 I hope this will not end here, but I hope this will just be the beginning. So I'll just end it here and then give it over to the host, Francis. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Steve. Yeah. So we are running out of time, but I also want the panelists to address some specific questions. So I will give them 5 minutes each to respond to these questions. And so the first one goes to Eric. So, we've recently seen, a lot of police brutality, even though we've read about this, we've been told about this, but, we saw it, with our own eyes since, 2015, and the one that seemed to have broken the camel's back was with George Floyd. So practically, what should we, people of color, especially Black people, do when we are pulled over by the police? What are our rights and responsibilities for us to know when we are pulled over by police?
All right, thanks, Francis. I mean, without question, with everything going on, even without what was happening, being pulled over by an officer is quite nerve-wracking. But with what is going on, is even more crucial that you are aware of what kind of interaction that you have with an officer. And so when you're pulled over, understand that it's not a choice. You are not controlling that situation. You are lawfully detained, and so the officer is empowered to act within the confines of the law. And so what I say is understand the law, right? Because you are lawfully detained, don't do anything that kind of alarms the officer. Of course, within your rights, you may ask questions. The officer is not necessarily obliged to answer them. But whatever interaction that you're having with the officer, make sure that you're aware of it. And these days, with cameras and everything, I would encourage you to get a camera, a video started away, and just track what is happening. Just from a basic human interaction. Be respectful. We are all trying to get through the day. You don't know what kind of day I've had. I don't know what kind of day you've had. And so just because I've stopped you, that's no reason for you to be rude. Not to say that people are, but some have been rude, right? And so just understand that. Be respectful through that interaction, and provide whatever documentation is required. If a decision is made to issue you a ticket, or whatever decision is made, just work with them. And what I predominantly say is comply now, complain later, because there will be a chance for you, even if it's a ticket, for you to, you have the option to either pay the ticket, fight the ticket, or give the court a reason why maybe you made that decision, and they will, based on how reasonable that assertion is, they might just quash the ticket, or they might reduce the price. but I don't think it works out well for either the officer or yourself when the situation escalates beyond just a regular, traffic stop. It is highly unpredictable, and so we do our best within our capacities and trainings to make sure that we are respectful to you, and we expect the same thing back. Um, the reality though is that how you react shouldn't affect me, right? How you react shouldn't affect how professional I stay within my job. But unfortunately, we've seen situations where it hasn't worked out that way. But keep your composure. Comply now, complain later, and consult with a legal expert if you feel that you've been unfairly treated by an officer. Again, know the processes to report any situations that may come up. How do you file a complaint against an officer if you feel like they haven't been professional in their interaction with you? Do you even know where the police station is? Learn about those things, because it is up to us to hold folks in powerful positions accountable. And if we fail to take upon that role, that is when people with bad intentions fill in and use those positions to further hurt us.
Thank you, Eric, for that insightful information on how to practically deal with, an officer. To comport yourself when you are pulled over by an officer. Yeah. So, Vicky, do you want to respond to this? Now, in our educational institutions, especially higher ed and in the corporate world, there is this trend of recruiting diversity officers to increase the number of, people of color, especially Black people, to remedy the systemic injustices that are meted out to these people. In your opinion, does it actually work? And how can Black people position themselves to benefit from this?
One thing I have to say first and foremost is America loves symbolic wins, and I mean that as in, like you've seen it, right, with like the movement, the protest happening now, where they'll paint Black Lives Matter on streets, name streets Black Lives Matter, or somehow naming a street Martin Luther King is automatically supposed to make it better. But that's literally the same street you killed another Black person on. Like, there's all these contradicting things that America likes to do, and I think we've already talked about this constantly, educating ourselves. For me, I've had issues with this in the past, especially in the past recent months, and I've had lengthy conversations with friends where we're like, is anybody else bothered by this? Like, Breonna Taylor's murders are still not, none of them is charged, only one of them has been fired. Meanwhile, her boyfriend, who was wrongly being looked for, is in custody. Like, there's all these things going on. And so when I see in the corporate world or in institutions of higher education, where I will very much call them symbolic wins, right? I'm not saying that Black person doesn't deserve to be there, because they've worked their whole lives to attain that position. However, the means, it's almost sort of like a deflection, right? Let's announce that Reddit is going to change their CEO to a Black person so that we no longer sign petitions and try to actively, hold people in power accountable to the things that they're doing, all right? Or like, at Netflix, let me say I'm going to donate $10 billion to whatever, like, what does it even mean to say, like, racial gaps, right? There's also always this, like, language of ambiguity. There's no really much clarity. Or, Ben and Jerry's, I was so excited. I don't really like Ben and Jerry's, but for instance, like, Ben and Jerry's is an ice cream company. And when the whole George Floyd thing came out, they had a beautifully written statement, which is another thing about corporations, right? They'll have all these statements of, we see you, we hear you, we're trying, and then nothing happens. And it's still only 2% of their company being, people of color, not even Black people, people of color, right? So within that 2%, you gotta go find a small slice that are Africans. If anybody works at Facebook, I'm sorry, I'm calling her out. But Ben and Jerry's, they have this beautiful statement, and I'm like, oh, and they had action items, right? For me, with my background, just like being involved, it's always about action items, just as the kind of person I am. If you're saying you want to do something, tell me where exactly you're going and how you plan on doing it. So they had action items. They were like demanding things. They brought up laws that I didn't know about, only to find out that their company doesn't pay their workers, and that their company, like there's all these things and all these problems. So as a Black person, if by some way, by some wild affirmative action, you end up in this position, you cannot become comfortable, right? Like, I all 4 years at UW, and relatively speaking, like my whole experience in education here has been very easy, right? Like financially, UW was easy. Academically, UW was easy. Socially, it was cool. And so whenever I talk about UW and have all these problems with UW, people be like, what exactly is your problem? Like I would get asked that all the time. They're like, you don't gotta pay for it, da da da. Like, what is your issue with UW? And I'm like, my issue with UW stems from the fact that I see how unfair it is to the majority of people of color, right? And I brought this up in terms of like model minority theory or like tokenism. And it's again back to your question about having these particular Black people in like companies, is to check off a box. I remember my freshman year, they were like, our percentage of Black people is 3%. First of all, 3% is nothing to boast about. Come to find out, it's actually 2.6%. So how are you gonna have like 30,000 people going to your school and have only like 500 kids be Black? But you like that is something they put to the front. I don't know how many of my friends were constantly on like magazines for the university. We'd always send each other jokes, but like they owe you a check because they love using your face. And so like they'll put you in these places, but once you get there, you cannot be comfortable just because it's going okay for you. So I have a problem with UW. I have a problem with a lot of the companies in Seattle, and I have a lot of issues with corporations who, on the surface level, seem to be doing a good job. Like Netflix has the strong Black lead thing going on. There's a lot of Black content coming, a lot of representation. It's beautiful. But if you're a new executive doing this whole movement of diversity inclusion as a Black person and you enter there and you're not changing the system of that company, it's not enough to just give content that speaks to Blackness. You have to change the system of that company, which speaks to the desire to actually look out for Black people, right? Because that's the only thing that's gonna like make any of this work. Mr. Richmond mentioned that, right? Like economic empowerment comes from that way. Because if you can dismantle how Netflix hires, looking for jobs has been such an eye opener in terms of how companies hire. Like you know some of these things, but you don't know until you have to go through it. And the way they filter things out, and the way they sort it out, and even how they recruit from certain universities, like the attention that historically Black colleges get from the big five, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple, and Microsoft, is minuscule. Like it's a crumb compared to the attention that they'll give to a school like UW. Like I don't know how many buildings have Microsoft attached to them at UW, and I know we're in Seattle, but still, or like in Portland, like Nike goes crazy. And I have some friends who go to HBCUs and like, oh yeah, they stopped by a little bit. Like, they showed up and did a little thing. We got leftover food. I read an article. The guy was like, I was a Black person at this company, and I was a part of the community, like the group that had to go, talk to different colleges. And the historically Black college was fed the food from the predominantly white institution from the night before. Like, what does that say about how you value people? And if you're a Black person in a higher position and you're seeing it, and because you enjoy the comfort of your position, the money of your position, you're worse. I'm sorry to say this, like you're worse than like all of them combined. So I gotta have a conversation with Bernice because she's an educator, and I think over the few months, like shout out to God, just revealing more and more things. I plan on being in higher education just because of this. Like my experience at UW, while personally wasn't bad, like communally, because we have to start thinking about each other communally, and then that extends to like our society in Washington, and then maybe the Pacific Northwest, the West Coast, and then this country and globally, is not a representative of where I want to be. But I think one of our pastors was like, the place that bothers you the most is the place you need to be in, right? Because why is it bothering you? What is it in there that's really like poking you in your side? And you need to go and pull it out, because who else is it poking, right? And to the point where maybe it pokes you and you bleed a little, but someone dies. Like I know, like there are students who have been on the like homeless because just some of the policies that UW has is ridiculous. And it's not just them. Most predominantly white institutions, there are only a few, I don't know, Bernice probably knows better than me, the number of historically black colleges compared to predominantly white institutions, the gap is crazy. And then when you get to funding, it's even worse. Like, it's sad. So I guess to answer your question, I don't even know what your question really was anymore. Sorry, I get mad. But
Thank you,
to touch on your question, when it comes to these diversity and inclusion things, first of all, we have to be able to see them for what they are. Some people mean well, like they're actually trying, but it's so easy to see the company that's just trying to check off the box. And before you get to that company, like, meet with the people of color who work there. I was like, I thought I wanted to work at T-Mobile and I wanted to be in the diversity and inclusion thing. So I met with the person. And this is someone who actually has a track record of changing systems. So when they're in their position, I'm like, I trust you to be doing what you're saying you're doing. And then again, the ones who are checking off boxes, real easy to spot. Again, if you work at Facebook, I'm sorry, like you need to go do some things because it's just not working. Like, right? Like it's not working. And more we see as we come to like politics and regulations, how that company is just really falling behind in terms of like the forward movement that this the people of color and black people especially are trying to do here. If you work at Amazon, please, I want to fix it. So again, I'm just saying like recognize the movements for what they are and then recognize the space you're in and what you're doing in that space. How important is your comfort to you versus like the forward mobility of your people? Because if I'm seeing my fellow black students struggling to get financial aid, they can't eat, they're couch hopping, and it shouldn't be that way. They got hurt because of the university's athletic department and had 4 surgeries and still didn't get the university that owns like 8 hospitals to pay for it. I'm gonna get mad, right? So forget the financial aid that I have. Forget my financial aid. Forget what's going on with me academically. I'm fighting for the person next to me because it's frustrating. And you look like a bad person. And I'm sorry, I've been raised a Christian my whole life. That's what we're supposed to do, right? Who cares if in your position you're comfortable, if you have to step? Who knows if that the money they're supposed to give him is what they gave me? If you have to step on the next person to get there, then you're being a checkbox. And I don't know who wants to live their life being a box that needs to be checked off. That's not much purpose. And I don't think that's much purpose. So if you want to hear me say more about this, find me on different platforms because it's just so frustrating. That
Thank
question
you,
is asking, Francis. That question is just.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicky. We have unfortunately 3 minutes left, and I wanted Benny. Hello, and I wanted Benny to talk to inferiority complex because what is happening right now can create, inferiority complex among Black kids. So how can parents and teachers help these kids to know their worth and know that, they can set goals and achieve them? We have 3 minutes. Thank you. Sorry for, yeah.
Oh, no, that's fine. Well, there was so much I was going to touch on, but I'm just going to touch on the basics, which is my main concern. We have to get involved in our education system. Education here is paid by your tax dollars. Educators, we are accountable to you for your kids. We have to teach you kids. And so when parents don't hold us accountable, we get away with stuff. I want you guys, like when you read into history, when schools were segregated back after the Brown versus Board of Education, think about who was made to desegregate. They took the Black kids to the white school. They didn't take the white kids to the Black school. And so with that, what is our definition of a good school versus a bad school? Oftentimes the bad school is the one with the ghetto Black kids and the good school has all the white kids. These are things that we need to look at in being able to make decisions on how can we make our community schools better, right? And all these school leaders and everything, they're accountable to their taxpayers, which is you in that community. That's why every year we have to tell you what we have done. And oftentimes, like the school I work for, it's a low socioeconomic urban school. Nobody questions us. We try our best. And so we could do more. We need to do more. And part of it is we are so focused in teaching content that we don't have the opportunity to have some of these conversations we're having right now with kids. How do we teach our brown and Black boys to be safe or feel safe, what they need to do? Because we're being told to teach them math, teach them science, which oftentimes some of these things are solidify in your life, but that's a whole different conversation. Um, sorry. We I how many more minutes do I have?
Oh my God,
Just a
keep
few
talking.
seconds.
I didn't hear it. I'm so sorry. Keep going.
Well,
Finish,
I mean,
finish it. Finish
just
it.
to say a little bit,
Yeah.
this fight for to be able to fight in education cannot be done by one person. I work in a district where 80% of our teachers who teach kids are white. 80%. 5% is black. But then there's over 30% of black kids in the school. So oftentimes that is where the gaps happen, right? There's no shared culture perspectives. They don't speak the same language. They're all on different pages. The minute a female student is upset, she's classified as an angry black little girl with all these emotions. When a black boys may act a certain way and it's looked as a discipline issue, whereas maybe they're just having a bad day. And so Rich, somebody said it before, and then what's his name? Richmond said it better. We need to diversify in our career choices. Being doctors, lawyers, and nurses is not enough. We need to go to places where we are not entering. We need to sit at the table where we're talking about education is where it starts. The doctor would not be there if that teacher did not start. And so we need to start from the grassroots. When I can't think of her name. I think it was Abna. I can't remember when she spoke earlier. It starts at home, and so in our education system in this country is very toxic to people of color. And unless there's more people of color to start uprooting and helping shift it a little bit, like we have to shake the ground education starts on, it's not going to change. And just to put a little perspective to Victoria's question that was asked, when people of color are tokenized, we get tokenized all the time. I get tokenized all the time. Let's ask Bernice. She may know more. Like, I don't want to speak for Black people that I work with. I have a different perspective. But when we get tokenized, we have to use our powers for good. Once we get there, and when you use your powers for good, you are going to rub people off the wrong way. But unfortunately, when people don't feel uncomfortable, then nothing is happening. They're set in stone in their ways. And so when we get tokenized to be in certain places, we take it with grace, but then the work that we do there has to be impactful for who is yet to come. And so, I mean, I love education. Education is my passion. The more I come to learn about the systems here, the more I'm kind of like, there's no way. African parents, our kids are great kids. I have to say this. You tell them go to school, go learn. They do what they need to do because they know if they don't behave, their parents are not having it. Since our kids behave well, most of the time we don't get ourselves involved because they got it taken care of. Unless they tell, like when I was in high school, my parents tell me, well, if you want me to come, tell me and I'll come. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, then I never want you to come. But it was, I mean, of course they have to work to take care of the family, but it's nice for us to get involved. There's so many opportunities in this country. And I'm going to say this, your child does not have to go to a 4-year college to be successful. I repeat myself, your child does not have to go to a 4-year college to be in debt to get a good job. There is a variety of careers in this country where, I mean, this is one of the places sometimes being a minority does help, where there's financial assistance for kids to gain skills. There should be African kids building all those high rises in Seattle. We should occupy those places to be able to get our voices heard. Just diversifying our career choices. There's so many things out there these days that we don't have to limit ourselves to just one thing. And I mean, AC works with the College Success Foundation program where they provide opportunities for minority kids. These are very important fundamental programs that we need in our education systems. And these are programs that kids need to be a part of because it comes with financial gain. It comes with what I said in the very beginning. My parents told me to go to college, but they didn't know I was going to get there. And so those are the conversations and the things we need to occupy those spaces to provide opportunities, and not necessarily to provide opportunities just for African kids, but provide opportunities for our Black and brown kids also. They are all our kids. They are all our future. And unless we want history to repeat itself with the kind of leadership that we have, we have to start pushing kids in different directions. Yeah, but I'm just gonna stop there because I think I took too much time.
All right. Thank you so much. We are running a deficit time right now. We are behind time, but there are two more other questions that I wanted. One is directed at Eric to use half a minute to address it. And then there's Charles who wants to ask a question. I don't know whether it's a generic or specific. Charles, can you use like 1 second or 2 seconds to ask the question? And the person has 30 seconds to address it. Then we all hop up here. Thank you.
Yeah, hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so my question has to do with cops. You know, I don't understand why, for some reason, cops are always aggressive towards Black people every time they pull them over. I just don't seem to understand that. See, that's why a lot of times people don't understand why Black people are the way they are. It's because the way cops treat them when they pull them over. They're not very nice to them. And then just because they feel like they have a gun and they think they have that power to kind of talk down on them or treat them like that, you know. And then there's never the other way around when they pull a white person over. I've seen white people get pulled over and the cops are very nice to them, very polite to them. Even sometimes these white people talk down on these cops and they never react. And they're never a threat to them. And that's what I don't understand.
Brother Charles.
Yeah.
Hey, do you have any personal experience having a negative encounter with a cop?
Oh yes, I have a lot of experience with cops.
Could you quickly just briefly share one?
Well, one of them was one time I was going to work. I work 2 jobs, so I was going to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I got pulled over. And then I was actually, don't get me wrong, I was actually speeding because I was running late. So he pulled me over and he asked for my, license and registration. I gave it to him. And like his tone and the way that he was asking me, it was like, dude, all you got to do is just be polite and ask me for what you need and I'll provide it to you. And then he was just being rude. Oh, you need to slow down. I was like, sir, I'm speeding because I'm running late. I apologize. It won't happen again. And then he just kept on talking. And the whole time, it was just me and him. And I don't want it to escalate because there's nobody there to, save me. So I just kept quiet and he did his thing, went and checked, and he saw that I was clean. There was nothing on my record or whatever. And then he came back and he started yelling at me, oh, you need to slow down. Don't let it happen again. Stuff like that. And it happened so many times after that. And not just me.
Okay, so Eric, can you use maybe 5 seconds to address and then we close?
Absolutely. I mean, not 5 seconds, but so here's the thing. One, you were speeding, you were stopped, and you perceived the encounter to be rude. Okay, that is all from your perspective. I'm not discounting or discrediting your opinion. That is your opinion. Okay.
Right.
The cop also has your opinion. And as much as we want to think of things as just being from one perspective, you have to take everything in sort of together. How does that encounter? What time was it? What led to the initial stop? You were speeding. And so at that point, I can't speak for the cop. There's no question that there have been times where, Black and brown bodies have been disproportionately, stopped. And, the encounter has been very negative. But also understand that there have been a lot of instances where the encounters have been very positive. So I hope that as much as we want to share the negatives, we also want to share the positives.
I understand that, and I'm not trying to bash my cops or anything like that. Good cops out there, I understand that. But I'm just saying, for the majority of the time, they're always disrespectful towards Black people. I'm telling you, I see these things all the time.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. You're a cop, so you're going to speak for the cops.
No, I don't think
you know. So
you would
I'm
think
telling
that.
you, this is something I see every day. Trust me, I see it every day. It's like, dude, don't be disrespectful. Okay, if the person is speeding, be nice about it. Be professional.
So
it's not that reason for you to be rude and try to talk because you have a
and Charles, here's the thing. It is so subjective to say they're being rude, right? You're not telling me anything specific.
I'm telling you specific. Their tone, the way they talk.
Right, and tone is so subjective, right? What I will say that would offend you is not gonna offend Bernie.
Okay, so I'm going to end it now. So thank you so much, everyone. Sorry to cut you, Eric and Charles, short. I really appreciate all of you for attending and for your time. I enjoyed it. I hope we have all learned from our panelists and also from our contributors. We hope to have possibly some other, occasions where we can talk more about this. Unfortunately, Tammy, we have run out of time for the past 10 minutes, so we'll have another one. Please, everyone, bear with us. We will have more occasions to address your questions. Thank you so much for attending, and I wish you all the best.
I don't know why you can't continue this.
Okay.